Hey, this is Michael Whalen, and this is episode 5 of the Artist Expansion Podcast. And today we are going to talk about streaming. And this is going to be a first conversation. We're going to probably do a couple of different videos where we're going to talk about different aspects of streaming. But a bunch of you have reached out to me and said, hey, can you talk about this? This is a painful subject for us. Okay, as I have said before, I think that the rates that we artists, I'm an artist just like you, that we are paid are stupidly low, ridiculous. And that the current situation it's not great for us. I also know that the source of suffering in life is not accepting what is. So I have no interest in suffering. So I'm not rolling over and saying, I'm just going to take it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say, streaming is the way streaming is. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create my career around things that I can control. And I'm going to optimize things that I can optimize inside the current situation. Today's conversation is some things that you can do as an artist, some ways you can be looking at the situation, which I think will help because they help me and they help the people that I work with at Artist Expansion. Spotify, Google, Meta, Tidal, Pandora, Apple Music, all of these companies are not in the music business. And so the frustration that so many people have, why don't you, treat us fairly? Why don't you, all that stuff, they're not in the same conversation with us. They're not. They're in the data business. They are building predictive marketing models. They are selling reams of data for all kinds of things, and they want us humans to be bringing eyeballs and people who do things and state preferences and create little profiles and whatever, because all of that stuff gets turned into data and then sold to advertisers and companies, and they make a lot of money. Stop trying to convince them of something that's just not important. I mean, music is the stuff that hangs in the window that attracts people as they pass by. But at the end of the day, Spotify, Apple Music, they don't care about us. They don't care about what we're doing. They don't care. If they weren't streaming music, they'd stream the video. They would do something else. Most people listen to your music on a streaming platform kind of by mistake. Well, okay, let me say it like this. Okay, so your music is served up as a possible option because somebody has listened to music, chosen music in the past that's sort of in the same ballpark as yours, but it's always amazing to me, like, how far off, hey, you like Michael Whalen? Well, you'll like this too. It's like, dude, that is like not even close to me, but it's fine. One of the very first things that you can do is go to your people, your fans, your listeners on whatever platform this is, and we're going to talk about this in a second, and say, hi, please put me as one of your favorite artists. That will automatically change what's happening with your streaming, like immediately, like overnight. The other way that most people listen to music is because of a playlist, or they'll go to a curated playlist on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever, and they'll say, hey, I like this and whatever, and they'll like the song and they'll add the song to one of their playlists or to their collection of songs. Your job is to get on one of those curated playlists, and doing that can be tough, but it's not impossible. More than anything, the curators, which they want to see if your music's going to work in context with the music that they've already picked. So one of the things that I have done myself, is create a little mini playlist where there's 5 or 10 tracks that are from that playlist, and add your music to it and say, see, look how well this works in context. And no, you don't know me, and no, I don't have a zillion, streams on this platform or whatever, but this would be a good choice because the experience for the end listener will be great. That's the pitch. And going to the curators and making this happen can be tough because they don't want to be found, and Spotify doesn't want to be hassled, and Apple Music really, really, really makes it hard. But sometimes going to independent curators and independent playlist makers is a good idea. Very often, those are going to be journalists. Those are going to be people who write blogs. These are going to be people who do podcasts. These are people who, have an interest in the music, and they also create curated playlists. So maybe that's a place to go. I would say that the most important thing that you can do in your career is to control what you say, how you say, what's happening with your brand, what's happening with your narrative. One of the things that I think is interesting is that when I talk to artists and they get very depressed about their streaming situation, they forget that they have control over their audience. You want to take control of your audience? Take control. You want to grow it? Grow it. You want to have a new conversation? Do it. A streaming platform is not going to get in your way, except if your audience largely lives on Spotify or Apple Music. That's not great. But if it lives on a mailing list, that's terrific. You control it 100%. If it's people who go to your website, that's great because you control that 100%. You see where I'm going with this? So you want to take control of your career by taking control of the narrative of your audience. And your audience is not, infinite. It's a finite number, 100 people, 1,000 people, 10,000 people, 100,000 people, whatever it is. Your job is to create a narrative with them so they are excited about what you do. So one of the problems that I see happening with people who are trying to grow their audiences, they're constantly like, oh, you got to buy this and you got to do this. And I have a show and you got to do this and you got to do this. Can you do me a favor? Which is like the worst thing I've ever seen anyone do on social media. Do me a favor. Do you a favor? What are you talking about? Do you a favor? Your job is to create an opportunity for your audience. Do you a favor? I would never ask my audience in 1,000 years to do me a favor. Ever. Like the expectation behind that, yeesh, not good. So your job is to build your audience and to create opportunities for them and to not be constantly pitching and trying to sell to them. So there is a golden ratio when you are dealing with your audience on social media, on a mailing list. It's the 90-10 rule. It's been around since, I built my first website in 95, so that's 30 years. I remember someone saying that to me the very first year that I had a website. So that means 90% of what you post, what you talk about, what you send to your people is not sales-oriented, retail-oriented, a request to do something. It is content that is a performance. It's behind the scenes. You're talking about your inspiration. You're talking about, your favorite time to take a bath, whatever it is, but it's not sales related. 90-10. Now think about right now how often you go to your people and you're like, you got to do this and you got to do this and you got to do this and you got to do this. No, they don't. No, they don't. And you will know immediately if you're doing it wrong because your numbers will go down. So having this dialogue with your audience is crucial for the next part of the streaming plan, because we are still talking about music streaming. And part of how you're not going to be trapped into the machine of Spotify and all these other sort of technological platforms is by taking control of your audience. And one of the ways you're going to do that is by listening to them. You're going to go to them and say, hey, can you make me your favorite artist on whatever platform that is? And then have them tell you what platform that is, because you're going to be shocked what the answer is. So am I going to use my own sort of experience and my personal preference to sort of skew onto my people? Don't do that. And you've got to take responsibility that how you see the world and what works for you and your preferences probably doesn't work for 99% of the people who listen to your music. You're going to ask them to add you as a favorite artist, and you're going to ask them what platforms they listen to. So if there's a platform you like, mine's Pandora, you may find that one of your other platforms is Amazon, which is one of mine. I have a lot of streams on Amazon. I never listen to Amazon Music. I never use that ever. And I have a lot of Michael Whalen fans there. So I have made a point of checking in and doing things and creating little promotions and, like sending messages to like my followers on Amazon Music. Okay, great. Maybe you'll do the same thing. But I think the biggest thing that you can do in a streaming environment is to be thinking about getting away from the streamers, not abandoning it, because it's like we said, it's a fact of life. But what if you created a subscription model? You went to Patreon or one of the other 6 places where you could have a subscription, and you create exclusive content for your listeners and your fans every month. And they pay you $3 or $5 or whatever. Okay, there's cash on the old barrelhead. I think for some of you older guys who are so used to like selling CDs that this might be good for you. But it's a lot of work. Doing a subscription type model where people have an expectation that they're going to be seeing like amazing behind the scenes stuff, and it's going to be new all the time, and it's going to be different, and it's going to be stuff that no one's ever seen before. It's a lot of work. However, you have control over what happens, and you can torture test content. You can have stuff in your, behind your paywall for a few months. And then if it becomes really popular, you can take a version of it out to YouTube or out to somewhere else. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, now your subscription becomes a focus group for the work that you want to do. And all of a sudden it's based on real data and real people who are stating like their opinion about what it is you're doing and if it's working for them or not. Because at the end of the day, if you're not listening to your people, you are floating around in the dark. Okay, so in my own life, in my own career, I have this picture of myself as like this electronic sound design guy dude. And my audience does not have that picture. They have this picture of me doing romantic piano stuff. And when you look at my output and, like I have 1.1 billion streams or something at this point, I don't even know. 90% of it is piano. And then everything else I've done, all the soundtracks, all the classical music, all the jazz fusion stuff, all that stuff is in the other 10%. That's the stuff I want to do. And the 90%, it's fine. But this idea of calling me a pianist and he's a romantic pianist and whatever, I just think it's ludicrous because there's so many great pianists. And I'm a composer who sits down and plays and my hands are flat and it's terrible. Okay, so as you start getting into asking your audience and listening to what they say and what they want and what their expectations are, prepare to be shocked. Now, people that I've worked with at Artist Expansion who start the conversation as, oh, yeah, I know my audience. Yeah. That's bad. I do this for a living. I've taught at 4 universities. I work with people all the time. I look at my analytics every day. I have no idea who my audience is. Now, I have a vague idea of like where I have pockets of popularity. One of them is Spain. Okay. But I walk around not knowing who my fans are, and it is such a great place to be because I'm always surprised. I'm always like in a situation where I'm kind of ready to hear something new and I'm ready to like go take action on something that I wasn't going to do before. If you walk around thinking you know, number one, you don't know. Number two, you're probably less likely to take action in a way that's actually going to make a difference for your career. So let's sum up because we covered a lot of stuff in, 20 minutes. First of all, streaming is a fact of life. Stop complaining about it. Number two, pick a streaming platform that you can work with, you want to do promotions on, you want to make things happen on. Mine's Pandora, yours may be something else. Start listening to your audience Ask them to make you into a favorite artist. It will change the algorithm and how they get music delivered to them. And there you go. And you want to start thinking about doing things like playlists and getting on playlists, and that's going to change things as well. But more than anything, you want to start taking control over the narrative of your audience. So wherever that audience lives, it may live in 5 places like it does for me. How are you going to be communicating with these people in such a way where not only are you creating opportunities for them to get excited about you and who you are as an artist, but you're listening to them and what their expectations are. And then finally, maybe you do want to do a subscription type model. Maybe Patreon and those kinds of things could be really great for you. I'm thinking about it myself, maybe later this year. Maybe. We'll see. But the bottom line is you want to look at all this stuff and say, look, you have choices. There's actions you can take. There's things that you can do. You do not have to throw yourself into the machine and be sort of grist for the mill. You don't have to do that. I think that we are actually in a transitional era in music right now. If everyone says, okay, well, this is the way it's going to be forever, I don't think you're listening. I think there's going to be a lot of movement happening over the next 5 or 10 years. And I think what you want to be doing is saying, okay, no matter what happens, my audience is the thing that's the most important. My mailing list is so important. My ability to directly connect with my people is so important. How can I do that? I hope this conversation on streaming has been helpful. I know that for some people this can be a controversial and, triggering conversation, but guys, you have the ability to take action. You have the ability to make choices. You have the ability to affect what happens with your audience. So if you're willing to do that and be consistent and persistent and consistent and persistent, you got a real shot. So I hope this has been helpful. Have a great day.